We are recording this conversation so others can view it at any time for the next year in here. So if there's, multiple sessions that you're like, oh, I want to get to them all, people can go back and watch those recordings, which is exciting. We do always just want to thank our sponsors who have made this possible. With NIPSCO, Mary Lee Environmental Center, NAAEE, and some others. I'm going to let the speakers introduce themselves today for this conference. So just kind of a reminder, most of the time, just keep your computers on mute. But if you ever have a question, just come off of mute, ask it. You can also type questions within the chat here on Zoom or the chat within Whova. I will be monitoring both of those for that. So we'll leave some room for questions at the end. And then at the very end, we'll just take some time to remind you of what those next sessions will be. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to Andrew and Ashley for their presentation.
So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for inviting Andrew and I to participate at the Environmental Education Association Conference. We greatly appreciate the opportunity and are more than excited to share a project that we've worked hard on through our partnership and teamwork to establish for a opportunity that we had together this past year. So my name is Ashley Overton. I currently serve as the Urban Conservation Coordinator for the City of Gary, and as well as a member of the Gary NAACP Environmental Justice Committee, as well as a member of the Outdoor Afro organization, Chicago and Northwest Indiana chapter. As part before we begin, I would like to inform everyone that for my introduction that I was born and raised in the city of Chicago and now currently residing in Gary, Indiana. Through my service, I honor my ancestors who inhabited the land of Guinea-Bissau, the plantations of Nashville, Tennessee, Alabama, and the free lands of St. Louis, Missouri, and Chicago, Illinois. In my work, I also honor the original inhabitants of this land, the Potawatomi, also known as the Keepers of the Fire. The Potawatomi inhabited the shorelands of what they called Michigami, or the Great Lake, what we now call Wisconsin, Southern Michigan, Northern Indiana, and Northern Illinois. My home currently resides within the Lake Michigan shoreline in the Indiana Harbor Canal watershed, which flows into the Grand Calumet River and then into Lake Michigan. The ecosystem that I inhabit is home to threatened and endangered species, including the rusty patch bumblebee and the cardinal blue butterfly. I am grateful to be here and to share with you today.
Thank you, Ashley. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Justus Fritz. I currently, I formerly lived in Hamilton County, Indiana, but I'm in Placer County, California now. It's where I live. But when I lived in Indiana, I was the urban conservationist for the Hamilton County Soil and Water Conservation District, and served a number of roles in that capacity. Have also been a youth director, have also been a landscape architect, and kind of been all over the place, shoe salesman, you name it. But currently I live in Auburn, California within the United States. And I honor the original inhabitants of this land, the Nisenan, a group of tribes from the Yuba River and American River watersheds, ranging from the Sierra Mountains to the California Central Valley. The Nisenan has its own separate and unique culture, customs, leaders, holy people, and language. And the Nisenan is not currently recognized by the US government. My home lies within the American River watershed, which flows into the Sacramento River, and the Sacramento Deepwater Ship Canal, which flows into the Suisun Bay, which flows to the Carquinez Strait, which flows into the San Pablo Bay, which flows into the San Francisco Bay, underneath the Golden Gate Bridge into the Gulf of Farallones and into the Pacific Ocean. The ecosystem I have is home to threatened and endangered species, including the Boggs Lake hedge hyssop and the western yellow-billed cuckoo. And I'm grateful here to be here with all of you. I look forward to sharing some of the stuff that Ashley and I had prepared. Okay, so I stopped sharing that screen. Hopefully that worked. Great. Now, has anyone, Bethany or Paul, since you are only two here, and Jessica, have any of you ever introduced or been part of a meeting where there was that sort of introduction?
When you say that sort of introduction, you just
Yeah, the way that we,
I'm not sure what you mean.
where we introduced ourselves via, sharing our geographic location and honoring the inhabitants.
No.
Of those who were before us. Yeah. Yeah. What were some things that you noticed as we were introducing ourselves in this way?
So, say that question again. Anything we noticed?
Yeah, in terms of for you, did anything?
I was trying to picture what it all was. You mentioned one river after another, and Ashley mentioned a geographic area. So I was trying to picture it in my head while listening to you.
Yeah, it's sort of a recall.
Maybe a little map or something would have made it easier, but maybe that's not what your intention was.
Oh yeah, yeah, we could definitely. A map would have been an awesome idea. We should have thought of that.
Well, and Paul, I don't know how our northern Indiana areas. So here at Waubee, Waubee flows into Turkey Creek, which flows into the Elkhart River, which joins up with the St. Joe River, which flows into Lake Michigan on the southwest corner. So we're in the St. Joseph watershed, and pretty close to the beginning of the watershed. The watershed starts at Barbie Lake at the Continental Divide. So it's kind of fun when I meet with people and most of their water flows into the Gulf, and we're just kind of right over the hill, and ours flows into Lake Michigan instead of going into the Mississippi River.
Great. Well, thank you for that. I'll go ahead and get us introduced to what we're going to share today. And I'll kind of frame this because it does kind of require a little bit of a preface. And excuse me while I get some of this ready here.
Another participant.
Oh, great. Hopefully. So essentially what we're presenting today, what Ashley and I had prepared was a booklet that we, was part of a group assignment or kind of a capstone project that we did with the Indiana Watershed Leadership Academy. And the goal of the IWLA is to train and equip individuals with tools and resources to better manage watersheds. So we kind of come in as part educators, part conservation workers for us. And so hopefully we speak to your areas of interest as well, whether you're as an educator or just a concerned citizen. But one of the things we realized while in the IWLA, the Leadership Academy, is that there are limitations to watershed management. So for example, policies aren't being created in Indiana that address the most significant existential threats we face, the climate change. Furthermore, the rate of urban development is increasing, and the technologies to survey the implications, while impressive, are moving us further from intimate contact with nature. The kind of nature that restores our souls, renews our compassion, and grounds us in our identity. And we believe these are necessary ingredients to successful watershed management. So in response, we we wanted to add new modalities to the existing watershed management toolkit. We have a hunch that inviting those to connect with their watershed in a more emotionally present, grounded, oriented, or a heart-centered way. So the heart-centered way is something that, at least within the government realm in which I worked, wasn't necessarily a way to approach our conservation work. You could do it through the mind, you might be able to do it through education, but coming in a grounded, heart-centered way, and dare I say even almost a spiritual way, there's no kind of lane for that within the work that we did. But we believe this is a practical, necessary method of involving others to care for their ecosystem. So in this project, we are challenging some common educational methodologies. It was Alda Leopold, if you're familiar with one of the modern caretakers of conservation in the United States, or one of the original kind of people who started the conservation movement in the United States, was in his essay, The Farmer as Conservationist, that challenged the notion of traditional education. His assertion was that we need to get close to the things that sustain us on more relational terms rather than just dispensing information. So in this exercise that we're going to share with you, the guiding question we asked was, how do we move from watershed management to watershed relations? And so how do we move from soil and water and swamps as an object into something that's a subject we can relate to almost as if it's another human? And we think one response is by sharing wisdom from native peoples, artists, poets, writers, and thinkers that tap into a deeper reservoir of knowing that goes beyond the intellect. And that's what I term wisdom. Wisdom is this kind of knowing that goes beyond just what we have stored in our minds. So what's presented in the booklet is not necessarily new or fresh. In fact, I heard it in some of the presentations on Saturday. Instead, it attempts to better frame why the elements contained within it are important, practical, and necessary. I think a fatal course of thinking about the increasingly complex nature of the challenges we face today, I mean, let's think about them today, how complex they are, and the size of them is not necessarily, well, they are found by going deeper and by getting closer, not necessarily by being smarter or thinking bigger. It was Wendell Berry who almost always referred to thinking smaller when thinking the magnitude and the complexity of the problems we are faced with today. So it's true that every story with a hero comes to a point when they must shed themselves of everything they know. So this is their tools. You can go to Harry Potter, you can go to Luke Skywalker, you can go to Beowulf, and they have to shed their tools and their weapons and instead take the vulnerable step of going inside themselves. And it's here where they find new tools to overcome a certain doom. And as watershed leaders, as educators, as conservationists, depth is needed when we want to see transformation and healing in our hearts, and by extension, the land, the ecosystem and watersheds we inhabit. And so the purpose of the booklet is to invite its readers into wisdom that teaches us to include nature within our family of compassion and empathy. So what does this mean? Imagine you see a family of ducks crossing a busy road. If you sense the danger the ducks are in, then you may stop to assure they make it across. And so if there was a large curb, you might get out to help them get up and over the curb. And so if we notice that moment, first, to solve the problem, we had to get close to it. And then second, we had to relate to the family of ducks by sensing their danger. So in other words, you act out of compassion, empathy. Compassion, the root word of compassion, literally means to stir our guts. And by stirring our guts, it activates us into some kind of motion or action. And so also by doing that, by showing compassion, empathy, you also identified with them. So they no longer become objects, they become subjects to relate to. and you demonstrate a relational commitment to their safety and livelihood. And that's what family is. Of course, for many, it's easy to include ducks into our family of compassion because they're cute. It's easy to include our friends too, because we like them. But what about snakes and swamps? What about local water bodies and wetlands? What about soil and air? Can they be part of that family too? And our hunch is yes. And I think I only echo many of the sentiments that I've heard in previous presentations, and I know that many of you share. So hopefully this is just a reverberation, a continuation of what many of you are already thinking and doing. So ultimately, up to us to get close to these things, whether they're like animate ducks and inanimate soil, but the works of art and writing and poetry and the prompts in this booklet are meant to share the wisdom of those who are intentional about including the company of the other than human within their family. And so we hope it serves as an invitation, inspiration for you to pursue this relationship. So at this stage, what I'll do is, if you have any questions, you're more welcome questions, Ashley, if you want to add anything, but I'll bring up the booklet. We have kind of a fancy little website that shows it as a magazine. And kind of the idea of the booklet was to, our original vision of it was to be kind of a periodical, something that was released every 3 months or every 4 months. And they would collect information and news, that kind of, those sorts of things from others. So let me go ahead and see if I can share that. Okay, can you all see that?
I can see it.
Great, okay. Good. So I'll hand this over to Ashley. I'll flip through the book to kind of give you a sense, and I'll share the link with you. It might load a little bit slowly because my computer's slow. But this is Yumpu, which is a service which offers, you can share magazines and other publications. We included quotes from Native Americans, indigenous peoples here in the United States. And this is the preface and introduction. And then this is where I'll hand it off to Ashley.
Okay, all right, thank you, Andrew. So yes, thank you for that. So as stated, as this book was introduced as remembering our identity within the land, while working with Andrew, I've come to interpret remembering our identity within the land as basically understanding who we are ancestrally and culturally and how we affect our natural environment and ecosystem as a collective. As we know, humans, we are ever changing, ever evolving. Our language, our values, our morals, and our culture and cultural attitudes evolve over time. And so with that, what it does is that our cultural attitude towards the environment changes over time as well. Ancestrally, land conservation can be seen through some of the agricultural practices of the indigenous people, as well as my ancestors who walked and maintained the lands of Indiana and the lands of the plantations within Nashville, Tennessee. And then we fast forward to April 22nd, 1970, where that was the first Earth Day, and that was established and led to monumental policy enforcements and reforms. And then now today, with Earth Day marking its 50th anniversary, we saw global mobilization and environmental attitudes to advocate for environmental justice and protections for everyone. And so in a similar retrospect, through my service and my experience into land conservation and water conservation, I believe what has been ancestrally passed down is that I have been able to evolve and establish this culture for my household and my family to appreciate land and water. And I've been also grateful to be able to pass that down to with my two sons in hopes that they will continue on in their own ways and then share that with the following generation. So with looking at this piece here, I think we all kind of understand the value and encouraging young minds to evaluate our cultural attitudes and reimagine what that may look like in the future. So I do want to kind of pose a quick question. This is something that I heard back in one of there's a environmental education course that I recently took that talks about environmental attitudes. One of the topics included such. And so does anyone know what the 3 environmental attitudes are?
I don't.
Okay.
I can guess at things, but I don't know what you're referring to.
All right, so from the course that I took, they explained that there are 3 different types of environmental attitudes, and this is just kind of a side note of discussion, was that the first being development ethic, preservation ethic, and conservation ethic. And so I'm going to include a link in the chat that provides further details on what those environmental attitudes are. And then if people are open, we can kind of discuss that during the Q&A. But I just wanted to share that while we're on topic. And so going back, with consistent efforts, we are witnessing a cultural evolvement in our environmental attitudes, and especially within the emerging generation, Generation Z, I believe what they're called. And so whether that be through Greta Thunberg, who is impressively using her voice to advocate for progressive action in response to the threat of climate change, and even with many youth that are here located in the state of Indiana. What we are looking at is a mural that was created by students within the Northwest Indiana region who were asked to reimagine their current environment and create what they envision as their ecopolis. Throughout 2017 and 2018, the Northwest Indiana region has an ecosystem that was currently being, throughout years, the Northwest Indiana region has an ecosystem that is currently being multi-functioning as a corridor for a number of industrial facilities, and which we all know has long-term effects on public health, air quality, water quality, and land quality. So through 2017 and 2018, the Sierra Club started what is called the Northwest Indiana Beyond Coal campaign with the mission to encourage NIPSCO to switch to a renewable green energy source for production. And so what inspired me to include this within this presentation is that as humans, through our actions, we end up creating our own identity within this ecosystem. And for those who have developed the land along the coastal region of ranging from Illinois all the way through Michigan, we have created this industrial playground in the midst of one of the most biodiverse landscapes in the world. And so what creates a sense of hope and positivity in this piece here is that the youth that were able to create this were able to envision and rewrite that identity. So one thing I wanted to point out here was that if you look closely within the mural, again, noted a lot of the work that was done here was to kind of focus on NIPSCO's impact on the environment and those in surrounding communities. So what the youth were able to do here is that they rewrote and recreated their identity by changing some of the manufacturing and production processes for NIPSCO plants. So as you see here, instead of the smoke pillars and fumes that come out of those plants, they are therefore exerting rays of sunshine and pillars of flowers and plants and rainbows within our environment. And then also here you will see throughout the picture, there are some things of solar energy and wind power and wind energy and wind mines being utilized. So I want to pose to the group, is there anything in this picture that stands out to you and that you may notice is held cohesive throughout all these pictures, like 3 separate pictures?
There's the smokestacks all through there. I have a question on that. You said this was created by a number of students?
Yes.
How did they put it all in one picture?
So the Northwest Indiana Beyond Code, they held 3 different sessions, community envisioning sessions, and also advocacy sessions in 3 different areas. So as you see here, the students and youth that range from Kruger Elementary, a church within Michigan City, also in Kankakee Valley, and at the Wheatfield Public Library, and then also in the city of Gary. So each, if you can kind of see it, they're kind of broken up into 3 different panels. And each panel was created by a different group of youth and community members.
But how did a group paint one picture? Did they just have one person drawn and the other people giving them ideas? I mean, how do you do that?
So I participated in the one for the city of Gary. So what they had was, they gave the overview of what the Northwest Indiana Beyond Code was and what they were looking to accomplish for that session, the envisioning session. And so they had this large, I want to say like 12-foot long canvas that everyone who was there, they were able to kind of just add in what they wanted, and you did have one main artist who was able to kind of, draw what they could. But everyone there was able to add in the sun, the flowers and things like that.
So to me, it looks like they're all envisioning that NIPSCO stays and the smokestacks stay, and they all become an integrated part of a clean environment with flowers and green, and I see all the smokestacks have something coming out of them. So they're very concerned about the air quality there. In years past, as I ever drove past Gary, the air quality clearly was bad, and it must still be a little bit iffy. I think they're envisioning a cleaner future.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I've been on mute most of the time because my baby's in the room. Just so you know, but I'm really enjoying how the children, like the brightness and the it's almost has like a quilted quality to it, with the very geometric layout, and but I'm enjoying how it looks like nature has reincorporated the industrial part of the environment.
Thank you. Anyone else?
So they, it looks like they're seeing it from their perspective, which is always has been factories and smokestacks and everything. So they're just looking at it from their own point of view. If someone my age were to draw this picture, it would look a lot different, because my perspective would be from a number of years ago.
Okay. And so, what changes would you see if you were to draw this from your perspective? What changes would you possibly see?
Well, I'd take out all the smokestacks and everything, and maybe put in more cornfields, soybean fields. Maybe more of of course I grew up near Gary, but more of a small town feel to it.
Okay, great.
Guess that would be that.
And I think for me too, I can see kind of some of the change coming from, those stacks or whatever. But part of it is I sail out of Michigan City a couple times a year. And so the stacks are right there beside where the sailboats are moored or whatever. And just the change of those over years, what's coming out of them now is not what came out of them years ago. with the scrubbers and things like that that they've installed within the stacks. So some of them that are very close to Lake Michigan, what's coming out now is a lot better than what it used to be. And so, you know, you still see the same formation, but what's coming out is different now.
Thank you, everyone. And so, thank you. So also what I wanted to include, sorry, what happened to us? What I also wanted to include here, what I stood out was, given that each panel was created by different youth, all within a different region of the northern tip of Indiana, one thing that I saw that remained cohesive was the dunes. As noted, we would like to give, say, a big day for Indiana and getting the Indiana Dunes designated as a national park. And so that there is where we continue on a discussion about remembering our identity within the land, is that nature in itself can establish its own identity within our ecosystem. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, great. All right, so as stated, from what we saw there, nature in itself can create its own identity. And this piece here was created by Corey Havelberg, who is the founder of the Calumet Artist Residency, which is a nonprofit that based out of Gary, Indiana, which focuses on connecting people to nature through art. And so here he has noted that through the title, The Birthplace of Ecology, it's kind of noted throughout studies that the birthplace of the study of the ecosystem ecology began at the northern tip of Indiana. And so Corey's artwork here displays how the industrial complex throughout the region has dominated and kind of loomed over and taken over the beauty of one of the most delicate and biodiverse landscapes in the world. And so with that, it portrays the contradictions between our interactions with the dunes and how, and also the same said that we say that this is like one of the most beautiful and, you know, well-respected landscapes in the area. And so this is something that I just wanted to include here, that how, again, I stated how nature in itself can create its own identity within this area. Next slide.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Ashley. That was so good. So we did this presentation before, but it was only 10 minutes, so I didn't hear everything that Ashley had to say. It was so awesome. Other things we wanted to include in the booklet were writings from people who are just very intentional about what they observe in the environment. And I won't necessarily go through this short little essay by Aaron Mitchell called Earthlings, but it kind of gets at the kind of heart of our narrative as a people, especially if you are kind of within the Judeo-Christian kind of stream of thought and spirituality. But it goes beyond that. It just talks about what connects us as being humans. And it's interesting because the word human has the root word hum in it, which means ground or earth. And the word human also shares the same root word as humility and humbleness. And that we are people to be humble, we are people of the earth, of the ground. And so that they just kind of talks a little bit about that. One of the things that I found a lot of interest in is new words that help us make sense of what we're experiencing today in our environment. And solastalgia, has anybody ever heard the word solastalgia? Just
Nope.
No, okay. Solastalgia is kind of like nostalgia. But solastalgia is a specific emotion as it relates to the despair that we feel when we are losing nature. So you drive down a highway, an interstate, and there's a woods or a forest that had always existed there through your childhood or throughout your life, but then all of a sudden it's torn down for development. The feeling of despair, you know, hopelessness that you have is solastalgia. And I think the words that we need today kind of inform an emotional intelligence that we need to be able to articulate, not only to children, but for adults, because when we're talking about the heart, we're talking emotions that aren't necessarily developmental stages. The heart is the heart. And we can all relate to this loss of our favorite tree. Having moved out here to California, moving from Indiana to Northern California where it's dry, I miss the moisture. I miss the clouds. And it's been smoky here too. We've had 2 months of wildfire smoke. So I miss the clean air. There's no question that I was experiencing solastalgia. People who live next to rock quarries or mines where they see forests, or I think in West Virginia or Kentucky with mountaintop removal. That solastalgia, it not only has a real psychological impact on you, but it's changing the environment and it changes your livelihood. And so that word solastalgia comes from Glenn Albright, who wrote a book called Earth Emotions. And there's all sorts of words in here. He's a philosopher and geographer. And I wonder if these words aren't helpful for also our children to explain why, you know, trees were knocked down, and to equip them with the skills and the abilities to be able to articulate that. But along with that, other words, egoforma and ecoforma, these are two words that I coined, I think, to help us understand the posture that we bring to the environment changes the environment, and likewise, it also changes our identity as well. And those two words I've kind of coined are egoforma and ecoforma. So egoforma is like viewing a stream as a drain whose sole function is to carry water from point A to point B. That's all it does. And so as a result, the stream is straightened to perform that function. And so the desire to expedite the water changes our relationship to the stream. The motivations operating from egoforma, from the self, literally bend the stream to our ego's need for control. And so what's happening inside of our hearts, inside of our bodies, shapes the landscape in ways that then influence others and how others relate to it as well. Ecoforma views the stream as a complex organism that, with every bend, supports a whole community of life. So any changes done to the stream are done to support not just the life of the one making the changes, but other beings too. And a classic example in Indiana is the Monon Ditch. If anybody's familiar with that, I used to live right on the Monon Trail, and I don't have my notes in front of me right here. Actually, I might have them but the Monon, what Monon is named after, if you're familiar with that, is the big Monon Creek, which is in northwest Indiana. But it was once called the Metamahua, which in its indigenous language meant old woman or slow old woman in the Kickapoo language. So in the earliest texts that I'm able to find from European traders that can be found, it was called the Old Woman River. It was this big, wide, slow-moving, winding river that drained part of what was called Blue Sea near Madeireville, Indiana. And this makes sense because Kickapoo, like many native tribes, were often headed by women. But also in Native American culture, what is it's considered life. So water is life. We see that term popularized during the Keystone XL protests. This is also interesting because the Greek goddess Rhea also means flow of streams and water. Furthermore, Eve in the Hebrew account also is a word that means giver of life. So wind is life, water is life. But in a tragic irony, somehow the Monon has been translated into our common knowledge as swift running. And this is probably because the Metamahua, which is now the Monon Ditch, has been dredged and straightened to move water more quickly for drainage, so that agriculture then take part in Northwest Indiana to drain much of the Grand Kankakee Marsh. So you have this ecoforma name and identity to the Metahua has now become an egoforma, and it's even now the Monon Trail is this straight thing that you move quickly from point A to point B on. So that's just an example of egoform and ecoform and how our posture can change our identity to land and actually change the physical structures on the land. The next little, and within the booklet, we wanted to also offer practices. And this is the last portion of the booklet. It's just a series of practices that anybody can participate in. And so one is what we call observing the animate and the inanimate. And this comes and is inspired from a website, neseno.org, who David Perot, a Native American, has strived to kind of keep his language of his native peoples. And one thing that he points out that in some Native American languages, that they separate or they designate nouns that are animate versus nouns that are inanimate. And so a really awesome exercise is to just look out the window and notice things that are animate, and then also notice things that are inanimate. And that begins to just create a new way of observing your environment. Moving on. Okay, Ashley.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Okay, and so, okay, great. So as we progress on from identifying the inanimate, I wanted to share an activity that I once discovered. I had years ago took my oldest son to what is called a Tinkergarten class. And for those who aren't aware of such, Tinkergarten is an outdoor play-based class for early childhood toddlers. And so the instructor, as part of the activities, the instructor allowed the children to pick a partner, and the families of those children came together to build what is called a nature room, made out of yarn and some of the old sticks that were found within the park. And so next, the families will work together to find items that they would like to include within their rooms. So that being like leaves or acorns or pine cones, things like that, to create this, piece. And so when we were done, the families gathered to display and discuss the items that we included in our rooms. And then what really stood out was that there was one family who presented their room.
Ashley, is she still there?
The animate, which were the leaves, the flowers, trees, and pine cones, and things like that. And also recognizing the inanimate, such as the plastic, the styrofoam, and etc. We should now identify and recognize as being a part of our environment and ecosystem. And so, and that the inanimate are in fact integrated into our ecosystems. And so, if you kind of look back at the activity that Andrew presented by identifying the inanimate and the animate in your surroundings, maybe even this time consider looking at that list and considering how those items are related. Looking at what animate items or things were utilized to create the inanimate. So what animate things are utilized to create our homes that we currently living in, our clothing, the things that we have around us. And then also looking at how the inanimate affects the animate in that current environment. So one of the things that we looked at was how a lot of the clothing that we have on today, it's easy for us to assume that cotton, which is an animate thing, a plant, is utilized to create an inanimate object. And then also look at how, well, from this inanimate object, majority of clothing today actually is not fully percent organic. And so therefore they have PFAs and things like that wove into our clothing. And then how does that therefore affect our current environment, affect the adamant in our current environment? So that's that. And then again, so with this booklet, we were just kind of hoping to overall encourage an alternative method or new method on how we approach watershed management, and as Andrew said, emerging into watershed relations. And in this part, and in any part of relationships, you would need to kind of have that interaction with those who you are hoping to build and grow with. So I've noticed a few changes in our initial greetings and interactions with each other. So we've included a statement that could be used at the beginning of a meeting or a ceremony that will help ground us and connect us to our natural environment and where we stand in our ecosystems. And then to also later to show recognition and respect for those who came before us. And so reading the passage, it pretty much states that, for example, you'll say, and this event is taking place on traditional, in my area where I'm at, the Potawatomi Native people or tribe land. Or you can begin it by saying that we are gathered today on the occupied territory of the Potawatomi who have stored this land for generations. And then, as you saw from when we began the session, was that Andrew and I both did our grounding introductions or orientations that helps better to establish relationships, better relationships throughout that process. And so if anyone's interested, and you'll be interested in maybe doing a sample of the introduction or grounding activity if you like, the template is shown here. And then also, if you are not aware of any indigenous tribes or the endangered species that are in your area, we did include links to an interactive map that will, if you search by your address or your area, it will show you the indigenous tribes of your area, and then also any endangered or threatened species in your area as well. So would anyone like to give a go at it?
Well, give a go at what exactly?
At the grounding introduction that's noted here on the page.
So you mentioned original inhabitants. Who exactly are original? The ones that were here prior to me being here? Prior to Europeans being here? I suspect that this particular land has been occupied and reoccupied by different inhabitants. I guess I always question, how do we know who rightfully are the occupants and who are the original occupants? And are they more important than the current occupants? Does that make sense? In fact, prior to, when the glaciers were here up in our area, there weren't any occupants. Is that more important?
Yeah, I think the when the website that you can go to, nativeland.ca, acknowledges that. It acknowledges that over time, there have been different tribes who have inhabited the same geographic location. And one of the things we want to honor in this, or part of what this orientation and grounding is to help honor those who have stewarded the land. And in the same way, we want to carry that essence of that stewardship that they kind of passed off to us, or not necessarily passed off, but that we can glean from. And and honor them in that way. And so sometimes you just have to, like in northern Indiana, for example, northwest Indiana, you have the Miami, the Potawatomi, you have the Kickapoo, you have a number of native peoples who prior to European settlement stewarded the land for a while. So it's kind of an ancestral way of looking back and honoring that.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I understand that, but for instance, there was an archaeological study done on a property close to Fort Wayne, where I live, and they found artifacts from 6,000 years ago up to 600 years ago. And I gotta suspect it's not all the same tribe over 6,000 years. But I mean, I understand what you're saying, that up until the Europeans, people lived with the land rather than fighting it. And I think kind of seems like that's what you're driving at, to honor the idea of being a part of nature rather than being against it.
Yeah.
So you're wanting us to read this?
Well, if anybody, sorry, Ashley, you can go ahead.
I will.
Yeah, we'd just be curious. I mean, it's a way of just kind of grounding and identifying us to the land and to the place where we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Paul McAfee. I live in Northeast Indiana. I honor the original inhabitants of this land. I'm not sure who it was where I live, Miami or whatever. My home lives in the I guess I'm not sure what the name of it is, Eel River, I guess, which flows into, let's see, the Eel River flows into the Wabash, flows into the Ohio River, flows into the Mississippi River, flows into the Gulf of Mexico. The ecosystem I inhabit is home to where I live exactly doesn't have any threatened or endangered species, but there are a lot that aren't here anymore. Wolves. There's no longer any wolves here, or bears, or elk, or bison. I am grateful to be here.
Thanks, Paul.
Someone else has to do this. Put me on the spot.
Paul,
Yeah.
I'll totally go after you, man.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Jessie. I live in Milford, Indiana, United States of America. I honor the original inhabitants of this land, most recently the Miami. My home lies in the St. Joseph watershed. Lake Wabi flows into Turkey Creek, which joins up with the Elkhart River flowing north into the St. Joe River, which flows into Lake Michigan. The ecosystem I inhabit is home to some threatened or endangered species, including the club shell mussel and Indiana bat. And I am grateful to be here.
I'll do it too. Yeah. So hi, I'm Bethany Friesen. I live on the southeast side of Indianapolis, Indiana, in the United States of America. I honor the original inhabitants of the land. In this area, the Miami and Kickapoo tribes. I don't know what waters well, the White River is close to us, I guess, and I'm not sure what that flows into. The ecosystem I inhabit is home to some threatened or endangered species, including several types of bats, and I am grateful to be here.
Great, thank you. So we established this to kind of, as part of the discussion was that having these conversations and grounding through introductions and this is to establish the things of hope for change in our environment and prospect of our coming or existing climate crisis. So one of the activities that we have included within our booklet is kind of just a discussion that we had, a small prompt that we had was, what parts of your watershed do you love and or hope not to lose due to the climate crisis? So for myself, one of the things that I love about my watershed, as mentioned, is that we literally 4 miles away from the Lake Michigan beach, and then through to due to climate change and climate crisis, we are currently experiencing beach erosion. So that is an asset that I greatly value and appreciate, and so that is one thing that I would hate to lose during this time. And so, kind of short on time, but also to include when having these discussions and conversations, and during your work with environmental education and outreach and conservation, we like to intensify participation with those who within the watershed by encouraging to make a pledge of support. So in this pledge, we drafted up with stating that as such, I'll give a go at it. It says that I, Ashley Overton, pledge to be a steward of the Lake Michigan shoreline watershed and honor the traditions that protect this land and the ecosystem and the Koran blue butterfly. I promise to become an agent of peace, justice, and integrity of creation. I am. May I always act to preserve the traditions of my calling, and may I long experience the joy of landscapes that I have nurtured. And that is all that we have so far.
Yep.
All right. Well, Ashley and Andrew, we're kind of coming to the end of our time. So I just want to thank you guys for being here. With the links that you guys have shared in the chat, when I upload the video to the Whova site, I will also, we'll also put the chat into that recording, just so people can also be able to click on those links that you have shared there in the chat. So coming up at 10:30, we have Seeds Will Travel. We have a session on program evaluation. Indiana Phonology will be with the non-formal education track that you guys are all in right now. And then there'll also be transitioning your classroom outdoors. So we have those 3 sessions. And then at 12:30, there is a nature-based early childhood environmental education panel. And then field trips, if you have signed up for one of those will begin at 2 p.m. So just give a big thanks for Ashley and Andrew. And
Jessica, is it against the rules to ask a few questions and go over time here, or do we need to shut this down?
A little bit. I can give you, I'm gonna say 3 minutes, just because I need to start another Zoom session and let this video.
All right. Well, real quickly, I find this pamphlet very fascinating, and I'm curious how you two hooked up on this and what made you decide to do this.
Okay. It's always been an interest of mine personally when I shared the concept with the Leadership Academy to move beyond just the objective way that we view things. And it's always been kind of my life philosophy to go deeper if we can, and find ways, especially within the realm that I work in a government way, to find just deeper, more heart-centered ways of approaching problems that we face. And I can be a bit of a challenger at times, and so to kind of challenge our traditional conventional nodes of how education works in general, especially in the world that I was working in. And so that was just kind of my motivation. I'm motivated by spirituality and about the heart-centered way of approaching problem solving, which does not dismiss the mind or the body or other methods at all. But as problems, you can see it in watershed management that the tools to measure the scale of the problem are getting larger and larger and larger. And that, I think, by extension, moves us further away from an intimate knowledge of our environment.
All right. Well, thanks for your extra time, then. It's an interesting thing you got here.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. Thanks for being our super participator.
Sure.
Yeah, and also in the Whova agenda, if you'd like to email or get a hold of either one of them.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.